views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open, the one and only show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world right to you. I'm your host, Daren Jaime, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough, as well as across New York City. Coming up on our show, we go front and center discussing the long-term impact of COVID-19 and pandemic stress. We'll let you know about some research that's going on to take a look at how it's affecting people. Afterwards, we'll talk about FreshDirect. They're actually celebrating 20 years of innovation, excellence, and convenience. We'll have a special guest from FreshDirect joining us. And then later, we'll learn about a project stewarding parks, community gardens, and open spaces throughout New York City. And then finally, we'll discuss how one organization unleashes the economic power of young adults and their communities. So stay tuned because all this and much more is heading your way. Right now, we're officially open. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open, a live and interactive program that brings the Bronx to New York City straight to you. I'm your host, Daren Jaime, and we want to let you know we are thanking you for being with us this morning. We also want to welcome our viewers who are watching on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, as Open is being broadcast live simultaneously on the MNN channel. Of course, you can stay connected to us on all of our social media platforms at BronxNet TV, and don't forget our website at bronxnet.org. Well, a lot has certainly been going on through the course of the past week. We'll take you through a couple of things with our Bronx updates. We start off with state news. New York State Governor Kathy Hochul has announced the launch of a new free hotline for those who test positive for the COVID-19 virus but don't have a healthcare provider. Now, all New Yorkers outside of New York City, regardless of income or health insurance coverage, who test COVID-19 positive are eligible to be evaluated for treatment by calling 888-TREAT-NY. New York City residents should also call 212 COVID-19. Governor Hochul stated, quote, "We've made real progress in our fight against COVID-19, but as new variants continue to spread, it's important to continue to adapt and expand our efforts to protect New Yorkers." In other news, politicians gathered in front of Bronx Supreme Court recently for the legislation regarding the January 6th insurrection. Our Bronx State reporter, Brittany Schuyler Albane, brings us the story right now.
Congressman Richie Torres, Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson, and Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz gathered in front of the Bronx Supreme Court to pass legislation regarding the January 6th insurrection.
I'm introducing legislation that would require members to disclose their pardon request to the Congressional Ethics Committee.
Several U.S. lawmakers took part in the insurrection and attempted to overturn the 2020 election. They are now seeking pardons from former U.S. President Donald Trump. This new legislation will require the lawmakers to disclose their pardons to the Congressional Ethics Committee.
The disclosure requirement would not only apply prospectively to future members of Congress, but it also would apply retrospectively to the members of Congress who requested pardons in connection with January 6th.
The elected officials hope that this legislation will hold participants accountable for the horrendous acts that took place and ultimately ended in 5 fatalities.
Members of Congress must be held to a higher standard. This is an attack on our American democracy, on the fabric of this country.
Not only will this legislation hold lawmakers accountable, but it will also set a precedent for a peaceful potential transfer of power for the 2024 election.
So we have to do something to make sure, number one, that never ever happens again. And in the 200 plus years of this country, we've always had successful and balanced transitions of power.
Reporting for BronxNet, Brittany Schuyler Albane.
And thank you, Brittany. That is all the time we have for our Bronx updates, but we're not out of show. Stay with us. We got more right here on Open right after this. And welcome back. Albert Einstein College of Medicine researchers were recently awarded a 5-year, $3.5 million grant to study the effects of COVID-19 on the brains of adults who had mild or asymptomatic infection. Joining me now and sharing more details is the Associate Director of Einstein's Gruss Magnetic Resonance Research Center and Medical Director of MRI Services at Montefiore Health Center, Dr. Michael Lipton. And then we're also pleased to be joined by the Professor of Medicine and Microbiology and Immunology at Einstein and Infectious Disease Physician at Montefiore, Dr. Johanna Daly. And we thank you both for joining us here on the show.
Thank you.
Great to be here. Thanks, Daren.
Well, I understand that you're studying brain changes that are caused by COVID-19. Can you give me a little bit more insight as to why you found this to be so necessary?
Well, maybe I'll start with that, Daren. I'm an infectious disease physician, and when this pandemic arrived in the Bronx, February, March of 2020, we were really focused on saving people's lives. This virus was causing a high mortality rate, and we got through it. We got the vaccine, we have some therapies now, and now what we're noticing from our patients, including those who had just mild COVID, that they're reporting a plethora of symptoms, everything from palpitations, not able to exercise as well, maybe some feeling like pins and needles in their skin. And then they're also complaining of problems with memory, focus, a mental fogginess. And we're now starting to study that complication. And as an infectious disease doctor for 20, 25 years, I have to say this is sort of an unusual long-term complication of a viral infection. So I think there's something very new going on, and we need to understand it both to quantify it, who is it affecting, or certain people at risk, and are there treatments for this? And sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
And Michael can, provide his insights into why we were doing this study.
Yeah, because Dr. Lipton, in understanding, a lot of research has gone into COVID-19, and we know that your study is a little bit different. So can you give us a little bit how this study is different compared to others?
Sure. So we know from pretty early on in the pandemic that COVID-19 was associated with some very severe effects on the brain. All kinds of people were coming in with stroke that shouldn't have had it. There was inflammation in the brain, and there were some other changes. And now with the people who were hospitalized with severe COVID, we see that they have, as Dr. Daly just mentioned, these long-term problems. The question really that we're asking is different in that we want to understand whether having the infection, even if you weren't symptomatic or weren't so symptomatic, could be creating similar problems in the brain at a lower level that people might not realize exactly what is going on. And those are problems that might actually accumulate over time. So what's very unique about this study is, on the one hand, that we're looking at people who were not so sick. But on the other hand, we are looking at a unique group of individuals, mostly residents of the Bronx, who we studied before the pandemic. So a key unique feature of this study is that we're taking people on whom we already have a very clear virus ever existed. And we can then look at how things may have changed in the brains of these individuals, whether they were never sick and they just had the stress of the pandemic, or they had an asymptomatic infection, or maybe they were symptomatic but weren't so ill. So that baseline is really a key feature, because we can see subtle effects that may be causing problems now, or maybe something that could be a problem in the future.
So how do you go about conducting this study? What will the study actually entail?
So Dr. Lipton, as he said, he's been studying young, healthy people in the Bronx, and he has baseline measurements, which is absolutely critical, because any change we see, we're going to feel more confident that that is from having the infection. So we're going to go back to his cohort of about 800 Bronx residents who participated in the study before the pandemic, and invite them back. And they don't have to have any symptoms. They're just going to have had COVID, have not had COVID, or just be colonized. And then we're going to repeat a lot of the tests that Dr. Lipton already had, neurocognitive tests and neuroimaging. And we'll do that 3 times over 3 years. And that will answer 2 questions. What are the actual measurable differences, and how long do they last?
And so when we take these tests, or when they take these tests, I should say, the question will arise as to how do we know specifically that it's COVID? Because over the course of years, there could be somebody with a different health ailment. How are we so certain that this will actually attribute back towards COVID?
Yeah, that's really the key question. And I think that there are at least 2 important pieces there. One of them is it really due to COVID as opposed to maybe some pre-existing problem? And that's why having the baseline is important, because we know in all of these people what their brains looked like on MRI. We know what their brain function was like from a whole battery of tests. And we even have blood samples from before the pandemic, and we can see what change has occurred. So that's how we really address the idea that this might have been there before. We can be pretty clear that what we see is a change. The other question is whether it might not be the infection, but it might have been the experience, the stressful experience of the whole lockdown and the pandemic. And for that, it's really important that we're not only interested in following individuals who had COVID. It's very important for us to also find people who didn't have COVID. and look at how they managed over that period of stress, because stress has effects on the brain, on the way the brain will look on MRI, on the way brain functions and people's symptoms. So by having these different groups of individuals, infected or not infected, and following them over time, we're hoping to tease apart the sort of pandemic experience effect as opposed to that plus the COVID effect. And, identifying who was infected and who was not infected is not trivial. That's a really important part of what we do. And that's really Dr. Daly's expertise. We're going to be leveraging some pretty sophisticated testing on these individuals to understand whether they really were infected or not.
Yeah. When you talk about stress, I know that's a part of it too, identifying people who were stressed during COVID-19. How do you go about identifying stress, if you will, because how does that show up in your study, if you will, when you do this research?
Right. So we actually use some very specific and extensively studied tests, psychological tests that look at the effects of stress, that look at the effects of isolation and loneliness, and we assess things including brain areas that we know are in particular affected by stress, and especially chronic stress. So we can get a sense from the way somebody responds to the testing, as well as what things look like in their brain, whether there is evidence that they had a greater or lesser degree of this chronic stress during that period of time. I mean, as you say, different people will have experienced the same epoch of isolation differently.
Yeah. Dr. Johanna, in all your research so far, anything so far surprise you that you could tell us about what you've learned through this COVID-19 pandemic?
People's resilience. I was on the wards in 2020, 21. I have to say, you just saw the nurses and people pull together. That never gets on TV, but the resilience was mind-blowing. The bravery of patients was mind-blowing that were going through it and their families. And I think at that time in 2020, we were collecting patients' plasma from people who had recovered, and the community really responded in terms of donating their plasma to try to treat somebody with severe disease. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I was able to witness really the resilience. In terms of this infection, I think, as I said earlier, to see these unusual complications weeks to months after recovering from a viral illness, which we've all had many over our life, that is striking to me. The other thing is we still don't have a handle on what is causing these long-term complications. Is it there's still hidden virus? Is it that our body is making an autoantibody and attacking ourselves? So I'm pretty excited to see how that plays out. And our own patients will be collecting samples, storing them. And as the science develops, we can go back to our own incredibly carefully characterized cohort and start to test, are there biomarkers and things like that. So I think the science going forward is going to be really interesting. And we're prepared to then integrate that into the program.
Dr. Lipton, before we go, I want to pose the same question to you. Anything surprise you or anything really stand out as you began to do this COVID-19 research?
Well, I was somewhat surprised that when we studied a small number of individuals who had lived through at least the early phases of the pandemic, that in people who really felt they were okay, they really didn't have symptoms, we were able to see some measurable change in their brain. And we're using some very sophisticated quantitative measures to look at the brain with MRI and to look at people's brain function with cognitive tests. And it's remarkable because when we think, as Dr. Daly had said, when we think about something like the flu, while influenza could certainly be deadly, the people who survive and get better get better. We don't really see in general that they have long-term effects, especially on the brain. So I think it's quite interesting that this virus seems to be not just the flu, as some people like to say. There really seems to be something else to it. It also is, a little bit surprising to me that as we go on over time, it's still really not clear what is going on in the brain. That something is going on, I think people are beginning to understand, but exactly what it is it the infection? Is it just inflammation? Is it a stress effect? We really don't know. And that's really why we're targeting a lot of these cutting edge methods to try and not just detect the changes, but really figure out what's the mechanism, what is happening in the brain, because that can lead us to think about ways to treat people.
Dr. Johanna Daly, Dr. Michael Lipton, thank you so much for your work. And certainly we'll be following back up with you to find out what you've learned and what we can tell Bronx residents and the residents across the city. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Daren.
All righty. Well, I want to let you know if you want more information, don't hesitate to visit the website at einsteinmed.edu and then also on Twitter and Instagram at EinsteinMed. We encourage you, don't go anywhere. We do have more show coming up. Open continues right after this. And welcome back. FreshDirect is celebrating 20 years of innovation as well as excellence and convenience since its founding. The company delivers the highest of the quality of best tasting food directly to the doors of its local residents. Well, joining us now to share more details, we're pleased to have the Vice President of Public Affairs at FreshDirect, Larry Scott Blackmon Jr. And Larry, glad to have you back. And it's got to be a good feeling. I mean, 20 years in the business.
It is a great feeling. Thank you for having us back. Daren, it is great to be with you and BronxNet. BronxNet is certainly a part of this story of success. We are really excited to be a partner and a staple here in the Bronx community after 20 years of serving New York. We are excited. We are looking forward to 20 additional years or more. And we're here. We're not going anywhere. We couldn't be happier.
When you talk about FreshDirect, obviously 20 years, that's a long time, but I want to talk about this because the last few years has definitely been a challenge for all of us with COVID-19, but FreshDirect really had to make some adaptation to be able to deliver. We had supply chain issues all across the nation, but you guys were still able to deliver. Talk to us about the last few years and how that really changed the trajectory of the company.
So the last few years, as everyone knows, changed the world. And for the company, the first step that we took was to ensure the safety of our employees, their families, their loved ones. And so we had internal metrics developed just to touch base and see how many people could have been falling ill, where they were. We then took every step necessary to ensure the safety of the employees, whether it be hand washing stations, temperature checks upon entry. We were the brand that did not shut down during the pandemic. And that proved itself to be critical and vital to New Yorkers, not just from the standpoint of individuals being able to stock their shelves with items, but for the needs of congregant settings that were shut down as a result of just in the city, the state governments making decisions that everything needed to close. One interesting point about what the pandemic did for the company, it brought us closer together as a team. We cared for each other a little bit more. We wanted to make sure we were together, and that's a time that we would not forget. But thanks to FreshDirect and our direct relationship that we have with vendors, we were able to stock our shelves when many other companies and entities, brick and mortar stores, were not able to. So we were able to house the toilet paper, the paper towels, the Clorox wipes, the Lysol. We were able to bring all of that in. And thankfully, those relationships remain intact. And that's a testament to what we bring as a brand and what we brought to New York City over the last 20 years.
Give me a little bit of idea of how you feel as now being known as a household staple. I mean, I've been at the station probably more than FreshDirect has actually been an organization here in the borough. But talk to us now, because throughout my time, I remember when you guys first walked in and opened your doors, and now to be known in the community as a staple, what does that mean?
Oh, it's great. It's great. I mean, it's something that carries a tremendous amount of responsibility. We preach that to our teams, but it's great to be known as a local staple. You know, you can't help but walk around and take a look. If you're standing at a red light, chances are there's someone walking around with a FreshDirect tote, right? We are a part of the community. You see our people, you see our teams. We walk through the community. We walk through every community that we're in. And so that's, we are as much a fabric of New York as our beautiful parks, as many of our other businesses. And that carries with it a heavy responsibility to do the right thing, which we pride ourselves on.
Well, I mean, it's a heavy responsibility, but it's also recognized by a local renaming ceremony. Talk to us about that.
So yes, and I like to start by thanking, on behalf of the company, Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson. Vanessa has been a true supporter of FreshDirect, and even our immediate past borough president, the Honorable Ruben Diaz Jr. Without their support, FreshDirect wouldn't be here. Without their support, there wouldn't be over 1,300 individuals from the Bronx working at FreshDirect. Without their support, there wouldn't be thousands of individuals that we've interviewed from around this city and around this region who have been employed and who've stayed with the company, and trajectories have launched. So thanks to Vanessa, we applied for a vanity street renaming application. She approved it, and we held a great ceremony with members of the community, tenant leaders, heads of other community-based organizations. So many individuals came out. God blessed us with a perfect day, and we had the perfect unveiling. The sign, the box wasn't stuck to the sign. Everything worked perfectly, and it was smiles and great cheer. And the best part is that members of this local community from Patterson, Millbrook, Mitchell houses came, and they were able to take food back, take fresh, healthy food back for their families. They brought their shopping carts in there. We gave them totes. Phenomenal day, phenomenal day.
And as a result of that, I know that your customers will also benefit, because as you're celebrating 20 years, you're also giving some anniversary savings to those who are customers of FreshDirect.
Absolutely. To our valued customers, we are offering special savings in recognition of our 20-year anniversary. We've had customers that have been with us the entire time, the entire 20 years. We value them, we hear from them, we listen to them, and we thank them for their continued support.
I looked and I saw you had over 57 million deliveries. Is that true?
Yes. Yes.
Since 2002?
Yes, since 2002, 57 million deliveries.
God,
Amazing
that's a lot.
number when you think about it.
Yeah, it's an amazing number. What does that mean to you?
Oh, Daren, looking at it from the inside, right? You think about the logistics, the operation support, the technology, the planning that goes into it, the care that goes into each piece, bringing in items, working with farms from all over the country or all over the world, bringing in olive oil from Italy or bringing in, corn from upstate New York, bringing in strawberries from across the country, all right here locally. That's what that represents to me. I look at every aspect of the delivery process. That's what we consider. We consider all of it. And so when you think about the hiring and you think about the operations, the planning, ensuring that customers receive their items and the customer service, because we pride ourselves on fixing things when they go wrong. And we know, and with 57 million deliveries made, you are going to make a few mistakes. None of us are perfect. But we do know that we pride ourselves in having A1 premier customer service and getting it right when we get it wrong. So that's what that means. Just think about it. If there were 57 million deliveries made, estimate the number of times people went to the site to look at what they wanted to purchase. That's 57 million indicators of trust in a brand from someone who is not touching their produce. They're saying 57 million times, we trust you to feed our families. That is the ultimate sign of respect and love.
Yeah. So where do you go from here? I mean, you got 20 years in, and I know you've got more on the table. Can you give us a little insight as to what we can see in the future?
Well, the brand continues to grow thanks to our new family, the Ahold Delhaize family. We are sister brands with Stop and Shop and many others, and that just creates a wealth of opportunity for this brand. We are going to continue to maximize our footprint here in the New York City area. We are the brand of choice in New York City. And now with our sister entities, that only stands to grow. So the future is bright for FreshDirect. We are, again, continuing to hire. And let me tell you, Daren, every Monday and Wednesday, I walk out of my office and I see dozens of individuals that we're bringing in all throughout this company. We are a majority minority company. The future for FreshDirect is bright. We are the shining beacon and the light for what companies are supposed to do in communities that they serve. That's what we look forward to, and we're going to do that millions times in the next 20 years that we'll be here.
I know you've been around with the company for a while, but is there one particular event or one particular thing that sticks out in your mind as to the success of FreshDirect?
The one thing that sticks out in my mind is when during the Thanksgiving season, when we all pitch in and we all make deliveries. And I made a delivery to a household, walked in, I experienced exactly what every delivery company experiences. You roll up your sleeves and you go out and get it. And so I recall going into this building and I'm holding the packages and holding the door and make it up. And I go into the person's apartment and he says, drop it over there. And I go to drop it and I look, he has these amazing guitars on the wall. And I look at him and he looks at me and I look at him and he said, thank you. And I walked out without a tip. So that is the memory that I have of servicing customers. Sometimes you take one on the arm, as they say, and I definitely took one. So that's my memory, but it was a great time and a great experience.
Yeah, well, we come from, that's called taking it for the team. But thank you for FreshDirect and thank you for the work that's going on. 20 years, a long time of being a staple in the community. Glad that we could recap some of that with you, Larry. And hopefully we'll be able to get you back soon talking about more of what FreshDirect has coming up on the table.
Would absolutely love it. And thank you, Daren. Thank you to the team at BronxNet for being the premier media choice. We love your partnership and love what you do. Thank you for your advocacy.
Thank you, my brother. All right, well, we got to leave it there, but I want to let you know if you want more information, don't hesitate to go to that website that's been visited more than 57 million times. Well, if you don't know it, well, now you do. It's freshdirect.com, and then also follow them on social media at FreshDirect. We do have more show coming up. We don't want you to go anywhere. Guess what? Open continues coming up right after this. welcome back. The New York Restoration Project is a not-for-profit organization dedicated to transforming open space in under-resourced communities to get a greener, more sustainable New York City. Now, joining us to share more details, we are pleased to have the Senior Director of Engagement and Programming at the New York Restoration Project, Yolanda Rodriguez. And Yolanda, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Daren, and thanks to everyone in the Bronx, and hello to everyone in the Bronx. We have 13 community gardens in the Bronx, and hopefully we'll be talking about that a little later.
Absolutely, but I want to get into a little bit about the project. So give us a little background into the history of this project.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm Yolanda Rodriguez, Senior Director of Engagement and Programming, and I lead a team of wonderful group of people who do engagement, that is engaging people from the community into the gardens to do this fabulous programming in the gardens. As you mentioned earlier, Daren, is an environmental justice not-for-profit and a citywide nature conservancy that preserves community gardens and other green spaces throughout the 5 boroughs. Today, we oversee more than 80 acres of parkland and 52 community gardens. And I mentioned there are 13 right here in the Bronx through the 5 boroughs. And through our Gardens for the City programs, we create and build new green spaces for underserved communities throughout the city.
So when we talk about green spaces and somebody's just, joining us and may not understand the importance of why it is necessary to have green spaces, from your perspective, give us what green spaces does for the city, the state, and just also the climate.
Well, as you can probably surmise, green spaces are vital and critical to our communities, particularly in underserved communities where we see the lack of green spaces, meaning the lack of trees, the lack of gardens, community gardens, that can lead to other challenges in these underserved communities. So it's critical not only for the well-being of the planet, but the people who inhabit them to have access to these green spaces, which was of critical importance to the New York Restoration Project to be able to ensure that this accessibility is for all New Yorkers.
Yeah. And when we talk about accessibility for all New Yorkers, we know that the Bronx has a tremendous amount of green space, more parks than any of the New York City boroughs. And we're excited about that. We're glad about that. But the accessibility, talk to us about how you're working in the Bronx, what's happening in the Bronx with some of these spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned earlier, we have 13 community gardens right now in the Bronx. And I'll tell you the areas right now. We have one in Williamsbridge, Tremont, Melrose, Claremont, East Tremont, Fordham, Eastchester, Castle Hill, Hunts Point, Morrisania, High Bridge, and on Willis Avenue. And then as part of, those are the community gardens. And then as part of our Gardens for the City program, we create and build new green spaces, whether it's a public school that has a vacant area in front of their school that would like to be transformed into a garden, whether it's a NYCHA development that has some space in their yard that might need some sprucing up, or might actually be a garden as well. So we work with community partners under this particular program, the Gardens for the City program, to do just that, to create those green spaces for these communities.
And as you create these green spaces, talk to us about the impact, because there's an important element of this, right? And as these green spaces are being created, it benefits the community and it also, benefits the environment.
Absolutely. As I said, it makes it, when you create a space for a community or a collective of people who maybe never even had access to a park or to a garden, or to even like a shaded area where they can just sit and talk to their neighbors, the impact is on many levels. Not only can you find some sort of a refuge in these green spaces, you can find shading that might not be available in urban heat areas in the city. You might be able to grow food in a garden that addresses some of the food insecurities that we're seeing more and more in the city, especially in areas where there are food deserts, where the closest supermarket to where you live is like 5 miles away. also with programming, when we bring in programming to these spaces, you get a chance to maybe see a movie. We have movie nights. You get a chance to exercise. Not only are you gardening, but also we have a series of classes during the season. By the way, the season runs from April 1 through October 31st. We have fitness classes, yoga classes, we have cooking demonstrations. So it's a wonderful way to not only seek refuge from the heat of the city, but also to involve yourself with your neighbors and your community in those ways that I described.
And so for us here in the borough of the Bronx, we're excited because we do have these great spaces and an opportunity to be able to cultivate and really take things to another level. The work that you do requires not just yourself, but you get a cadre of people who are working with you. I know that you're armed with volunteers. Talk to us about the volunteer pool, how they've been able to help to assist in the work that you do. And also, are you looking for some volunteers?
Absolutely. I just want to tell you what our website's address, nyrp.org, and find out how you can become a volunteer. You can volunteer at one of our 2 parks that we steward and we look after, which is the Sherman Creek Park and the High Bridge Park, or you can volunteer in our community gardens. Or like I said, I mentioned the gardens that in the areas of the Bronx, you can just walk into a garden and say, listen, I just noticed that this garden is in my neighborhood. I'd like to volunteer, help clean up, or maybe even become a member. So I would encourage everyone who's listening to go to our website, nyrp.org, or you can call 212-333-2552 and ask how you can volunteer or become a member.
Yeah, and the impact. Obviously, the community has seen a lot of great impact by the work that you've done. Talk to me about what do you feel has been the greatest impact that you've made on the community since this restoration project has begun?
Well, you know, the New York Restoration Project was founded by Bette Midler. Everyone knows about her as just a phenomenal artist, but she's also a phenomenal activist and has been working for decades on behalf of marginalized and underserved communities throughout New York City for many, many, many years. And this grew organically in 1995 when she and a group of her friends decided to remove the trash that they saw at the Fort Tryon and Fort Washington parks in northern Manhattan. And that evolved into what it is now, the New York Restoration Project. So she knew then, as she knows now, as we know now, that having green spaces, it makes a huge impact in the lives of people that didn't have those spaces before. You know, we talked about a little bit about food insecurity. Some of our gardens grow food that they actually serve to the community in pantries, that they leave in pantries. And another partner that we have is the Little Free Libraries. We know that there's a literacy problem in a lot of underserved communities with the lack of bookstores in these communities and with public libraries shutting down wherever we turn. So the Little Free Libraries is one of our partners where we bring books to the gardens, and it's been a huge success. The books disappear instantly. So we keep replenishing books at the Little Free Libraries that are installed in our community gardens. So Daren, I can't talk to you enough about the importance of not only helping to preserve the planet through these endeavors, but also to make sure that underserved communities have access to these spaces.
And for you, before we go, I want to talk about COVID because that's been a huge impact on so many people. How have you made the transition through COVID to be able to still maintain these green spaces and do what you do?
Well, you know, during COVID, especially during the lockdown, folks found themselves inside a lot. So where do you go? You go outside. So the gardens were kept open and we were able to provide robust programming, even through the lockdown period up until today, where we still have, as I mentioned to you earlier, events going on in the gardens, activities going on in the garden, fitness classes, et cetera, movie nights, et cetera. So although we're still sort of waging through this pandemic, we still keep the gardens open. You know, it's a place where people can, you know, like a public park, can come and safely enjoy the green spaces that they have in their gardens.
So I want to thank you so much for taking the time, Yolanda, with us for the New York Restoration Project. I think it's been very impactful to know the work of green space that's happening in our community and right here in the borough of the Bronx for so many spaces. Thanks much.
Thank you, Daren. Thank you so much for all your advocacy for green spaces and for supporting NYRP. Thank you.
Yes, well, we do support it. I want to let you know if you want more information, as Yolanda said, please visit the website, nyrp.org, and then follow them on Instagram and Twitter at NYRP. We are taking a quick break. We do have more show. Don't go anywhere. Open continues right after this. Welcome back to the show. Jobs First NYC is a not-for-profit organization working to create an inclusive New York City, advancing economic mobility for all young adults and the communities they call home. And on July 28th, the organization is hosting a free virtual event focused on young adults. Joining me now to share more details, we've got the Vice President of Education, Evaluation, and Impact. We're pleased to have Amanda Rosenblum joining us. And Amanda, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Daren. So excited to be here.
Glad to have you. And I know that some of the things that you deal with really are some of the barriers, if you will, that really prevent people from getting to that next level. So talk to us a little bit about the work that you do.
Great. So my work at Jobs First NYC is focused on our education solutions. And so at Jobs First, we're working to advance economic mobility for young adults, for those in their families, for those in their communities. And my work is focused on bringing career pathways to young adults earlier while they're still enrolled in school, so that they might figure out what they're passionate about, understand their skills, and chart their professional futures so that they can really locate family sustaining wages for themselves, and also a sense of purpose in their communities.
And I know a little bit of what you do is really helping people to adapt to the current work environment. We've seen how the work landscape has changed throughout the course of the past several years, particularly after COVID, during COVID. Give me a little bit about helping them to make that change, because there's so much out there that continues to be ever evolving.
Yeah, I mean, actually, so the event we're talking about today is called Adapting to the Future of Work. And that's what we are always doing, whether it's COVID or, or the changes we're seeing in the labor market now, or a couple of years ago. What we're seeing is just, obviously, the conditions have been exacerbated by the pandemic and all it has wrought. But we are always thinking about how we can make sure young adults are at the forefront of these labor market changes so that they can really be prepared for a changing work environment. We're thinking about how can young adults think holistically about their professional futures, understand that the skills that they're building, whether in school or training, can be used in the workplace. And then we're also thinking about how we adapt the workplace to be more welcoming for our young adults. So those are we're thinking about it on all sides. As an intermediary, we're really trying to change the system to really be what it needs to be for our young adults, so that our young adults can dream up the futures that they want to have.
I know recently you had an event with much success. Talk to us about that and how young people were actually advanced.
So this is our 7th annual Adapting to the Future of Work. On July 14th, we brought professionals together to really think differently about how we can change the systems for young adults. And then on the 28th, we have our event for 16 to 24-year-olds. This is the only event in New York City of its kind. It's a professional conference for young adults to get together and prepare for the future of work. We have some incredible speakers planned, advocates throughout New York City. We do a pitch competition where young adults are able to share their ideas for New York City called My City, My Community. And we have several workshops planned on different emerging sectors for young adults, from technology to beauty to healthcare, the gig economy and entrepreneurship, crypto and cannabis. So we're really thinking about how young adults can be talking about the careers that they want to have and the New York City that they want to make happen.
Yeah, there's some emerging job trends that are out there right now. I know that you're trying to make sure that our young people are really pivoting themselves and being able to deal with some of these trends that are happening. What are you seeing in the workforce that maybe young people really need to be paying attention to?
We're seeing that, obviously we have to be flexible right now in the workplace. But what we're trying to do is make sure that young adults have access to the kinds of flexibility that we as adults want to have. So being able to work for themselves, being able to chart a professional path, and also work hybrid or remote. These are the kinds of things that we want to make sure that young adults can choose for themselves. Right now, we want to ensure that businesses are thinking about young adults' skills rather than degrees. So we know that college is really expensive and doesn't always prepare us for career success in every industry. So we want to make sure that industries are pivoting to hiring for skills rather than degrees, so that we can really take advantage of what young adults are teaching themselves or building on their own.
And for people who are attending, obviously an opportunity, something, find out some more information, find out about opportunities, but give me a little bit more about what you feel they can expect by attending.
So this is a high energy event. We have a number of activities planned. Our keynote is also the president of Black Lives Matter of Greater New York, Nupal Kiazolu. This is a time for young adults to share their ideas, their perspective. Our theme is Dream Up. So we think of it as young adults really being the protagonist of their own stories and their own communities. We're going to have lots of what we're calling picnic table talks. So we're really trying to create an interactive environment online that you might have in person. And it's a time where young adults can build their skills. So they'll be able to choose which workshops they attend. They might think about how to navigate the workplace. They might think about LinkedIn or financial literacy. They'll be able to choose the sectors that they're interested in. And of course, we'll have lots of entertainment throughout. So this is a professional conference, but it's also going to be a lot of fun.
Can you give us a little bit about the success? Because I know that your events are definitely geared towards seeing them go to that next level. Give us a little bit about some of the success takeaways that you've had through the lens of young people.
So for my part, in our education work, in spite of national trends of students lowering their enrollment in community college or not graduating, we're actually seeing our numbers double. in terms of post-secondary enrollment. And we're exceeding our goals in our projects, from Transfer to Career Collaborative to Bronx Opportunity Network. And that is because of our focus on career pathways, on leading with student interest and ensuring that students can connect the degrees and the education they're receiving to their professional futures. So that's the success we're seeing there. We also have emerging sector networks in green economy, technology, healthcare, and we have community projects in all 5 boroughs that are really looking to both uplift young adults and the communities in which they live. So our successes are great. We've also published recently a policy agenda called Equitable Recovery for Young Adults on our website, JobsFirstNYC.org.
And so for young adults who may be watching and saying, listen, this sounds like something I'm very much interested in, how do they go about getting connected to your future events?
So it is on our webpage, JobsFirstNYC.org. It links, once you get there, it links directly to our events page. So it's .org/events. We have a login there to our Adapting to the Future of Work event, which will be July 28th in the morning. And again, this is a no-cost event, welcome and open to all 16 to 24-year-olds.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us, Amanda, and best wishes. I know you got that event coming up on the 28th, and all eyes will be on you as young adults are getting shaped and prepared for the future. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Daren. Looking forward to seeing everybody.
All righty, Amanda Rosenblum, Vice President of Education, Evaluation, and Impact at JobsFirstNYC. Now, if you want more information, I want to encourage you, don't hesitate to visit the website, JobsFirstNYC.org, and then also follow them on social media at JobsFirstNYC. Well, we've come to the end of our show today. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us, but most of all, I want to thank you, the viewer, for tuning in. Now, if you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the recablecast on BronxNet Channel 67. Also, if you have Verizon Fios, that'll be Channel 2133, or you can always go to the web at bronxnet.org. Also want to thank our viewers who've been sharing with us on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, as Open is being broadcast live simultaneously on the MNN channel. If you want a brand new episode of Open, well, what do? You come back on Friday morning. My girl, Rena Valentine, will be here to bring you the best of arts and entertainment. Until then, I'm Daren Jaime saying take care, God bless, and most of all, keep this channel wide open. We'll see you soon.